The Honourable Chester Borrows.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I appreciate the opportunity to take a call in this debate. And those people sitting at home listening in to this debate will no doubt understand what's going on here. We're debating the government's budget that's been recently put before the House, and the Labour Party hate it, the Green Party hate it, so does the Mana Party, New Zealand First don't like a lot of it, and the government loves it. That happens to be the nature of being in Parliament, happens to be in government at the moment. You know what? Not only do we love it over on this side of the House, but the public out there love it too. And as it's been reflected in the polls that are reported time and time again at the moment, we happen to be enjoying on this side of the House a popularity with the public that's never been seen before in the history of this country. It's lasted a lot longer than ever has before in the history of this country, and Labor hate that. It's interesting too to note that there are such things as parliamentary language and unparliamentary language in our particular rules of parliamentary debate here, and one of them is around hypocrisy, because I'm not allowed to call anybody a hypocrite on the other side of the House, and they aren't allowed to call us hypocrites over here either. What you do notice is a level of duplicitousness, though, that goes on from time to time, and it's interesting to point that out every now and then. For instance, it's not that long ago that I was roundly applauded by members on the other side of the House for a level of collaboration and consultation across the parties of the House, and they used that to smack around one of our ministers promoting a bill through urgency, and as if that had never happened before whatsoever. Whereas being bailed up by Radio New Zealand, I was happy to answer the question that what did I think of this response, and I was able to point out that one of the first things that I voted against coming into the House was a bill which was going to make $800,000 of unlawful spending by the Labour Party lawful. Not only that, not long after that, I also had to consider 1,500 supplementary order papers that were dropped in select committee process, which was also rust and stymied, and in the House processes as well through the ETS. I also managed to be able to sit from time to time on the select committee considering the Electoral Finance Act, where the chair of that committee said repeatedly, time and time again, we got the numbers and we're going to the vote. And it's also interesting to note that the major interjector at the moment is Trevor Mallard, who not long ago took a point of order and made a point of order about the word xenophobia, and he took offence at it. And the person who had used the word xenophobic had to stand up and withdraw and apologise. And yet only minutes before, the same member, Mr Mallard, had pointed out to my wonderful cousin, the Honourable Chris Finlayson, gutless Finlayson. So he's happy to call out on the one hand and happy to take offence on the other, but that's just the way it is. And so we've also had recently a speech to the Speaker immediately before me talking about all the things that she hates about the budget, and that's her role. She's the opposition spokesperson for social development. She's not expected to love our budget, but she talked, for instance, about the promotion of a convention centre in Auckland and the fact that 230 extra pokie machines would be put in there without conceding, I just repeat this and make the point for members of the public listening, without conceding, for instance, that in the former government, the one that she supported, one that she was part of, the then Prime Minister and the Cabinet, a number of members sitting there, had agreed to a plan where there would be a further 230 pokie machines for a convention centre in Auckland. Point of order.
Now, the member knows he cannot say that's a lie, and I'll ask you to withdraw that comment, and let's have some calm it down, because I actually want to hear what the Speaker's saying, and I'll ask the member to continue. First, just to withdraw that comment.
I withdraw.
Okay. Honourable Chester Borrows.
And thank you to the member, Honourable Trevor Mallard, for explaining the point I made just earlier. Happy to make an unparliamentary comment across the House, knowing full well he'll have to stand up and withdraw and apologise. The fact was that that previous government agreed to a deal where they conceded an extra 230 pokie machines in exchange for a convention centre about the third of the size that's proposed under this current deal, which the then Labour government would pay for. Thankfully, they didn't get any suckers who took it. There you go. So we also have had another part of the impassioned speech by the former Speaker She was talking about insulation in homes, talking about cold and damp and overcrowded homes. 215,000 families are now living in insulated homes that they were given grants to be able to insulate. And it was a constructive suggestion taken up by the previous Labor government. However, they were terribly unsuccessful, only insulating about 800 homes, as I understand it, in the time that they were in government. But that's wrong. Or, okay, my cousin Annette King shaking her head and saying, I'm prepared to concede, just because it's her, that I may be a few hundred out. In any event, when we came into government, we took up with the Green Party that suggestion, continued on with that program, and now we've seen 215,000 homes insulated under that particular scheme, and continuing to do another 46,000 homes under this budget, and also bringing into effect a warrant of fitness for state houses. People say, well, okay, why only state houses? And the answer to that is fairly simple. How can we expect other landlords to do what we're not doing ourselves? So we get stuck in, we insulate and we provide, warrant of fitness for state homes to make sure that there is a base level of accommodation that is at least healthy, to counter exactly the conditions that the previous speaker, Jacinda Ardern, was talking about, that they aren't cold and damp and overcrowded. And for the same reason then, we're building onto the back of 300 of those state homes extra bedrooms to get people out of garages and get people inside the house so that they can be warmer and they can be healthier. There is never ever a concession, and I guess we wouldn't expect it from the other side, that this government has been working towards helping those people who are vulnerable and who are at risk within our communities. And we've seen recently, this week, the launch of a program to provide breakfasts for kids in schools. Previously, that had been running 2 days a week in low decile schools, and the government has recognised that there is a need for people, no matter what, who may well be hungry, who aren't being fed at home for reasons that money is unavailable for whatever reason, and we need to account for that, because kids can't learn if they're worried about if they're hungry and they're worried about where their next meal will come from. And so the government has recognised that. You would expect then that opposition parties might even applaud that, but they don't. They say we should be doing more. The fact that the government isn't paying for the whole lot but is doing it in partnership with communities and with businesses is anathema to them. Because, of course, business can only be bad. Business families who want to, for instance, invest in shares in Mighty River Power must be rich. They can't be real families, they can't be real people, apparently, if they happen to own shares, if they happen to have a family trust. They can't be mum and dad New Zealanders, and yet I would ask those members on the other side of the House, how many of them, there's my good old Presbyterian brother, forgetting that he's no longer in the pulpit and yelling out, and he should remember the words of St. Paul, to be careful what you say unless you're thought a fool. I can't dig you scripture and verse, but let's face it, you're the one with the theological degree, not me. I was the lay preacher, I didn't need the ticket. But let's just finish off with this point. The problem we have with parties on the left is this, that they hate people who get on and succeed in spite of the circumstances that are thrust upon them. They hate that. And what we applaud on this side of the House, who people, in spite of things that happen to them, go on and succeed in any event. And let's face it, that in this life, it is not about what happens to you. It is about how you respond to what happens to you. On this side of the House, we believe that people should take responsibility for the predicaments they find themselves in, whether or not they are the result of bad decisions they have made or circumstances that are thrust upon them, and do what they can to help it. On the other side of the House, they would encourage their voters to sit there and wait for government handouts. That has been the message of their policy decade upon decade upon decade upon decade, and what we know now is this: the public agree with us and they disagree with them, and Labor hates it.
The Honourable Annette King.
Mr. Speaker, I have to say to my cousin opposite that Labor doesn't hate